Hello everybody and welcome to the channel. Today I'm joined by Konstantinos in a break from your regularly scheduled spotlights. We're going to be taking a look at the living world as a whole and also Raegh Theurodhin as well, and see where he is at. It's great to have you with us once again.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Now, for people who are aware of the living world, they may have seen some little comments popping up of late. One of which is if you actually go to the living world itself, you see not a warning, but an announcement that the Living World Fridays, in the course of the Awakening event, things are changing, things are being shaken up, and will be changing going forward as well.
Indeed.
So do you want to give us a bit of a background as to what the living world is and how you've got to this point where changes are occurring?
Yeah, sure. For people that don't know what the living world is, it's an interactive map, essentially, where you can explore the world in general and see the geography, and with different layers that you can see and explore, like spotlights. They're connected to some of our earlier spotlight that explain this area is like this and that area is like that. The main course of the living world, of the interactive map of the living world, is of course our Living World Fridays, which are, as you can see, there are nodes of characters on the map, where if you click and you have signed in our website, you can vote on decisions that the characters are going to make. Now, so far we started off with, if memory serves, 8 characters.
Mm-hmm.
In the beginning, there were 2 from each of the 4 original factions that we had released. And it has expanded greatly since then. Some characters have been taken out of the picture. New ones have entered. Eventually, we settled on a format of, again, 2 characters for each faction that are kind of moving in parallel.
Mm-hmm.
And so far, what we were doing is that every 2 weeks, the most voted character of each faction was moving their story along.
Yeah.
This worked very well for us, especially as an introduction to our world, because it's always easier, I think, for new players to kind of see the world through the eyes of different people. So they get different aspects, but it also feels kind of, they can be more connected to it, more relatable to new people. They are not kind of drowned over an ocean of information about a new setting, a new world, all the different players, all the different politics, all the different aspects of it. So this has served us well for since our launch, really. In fact, since before our product launch, we had started tampering with the living world. And we are very happy with how it has gone so far. People have come to love characters, some more than others, maybe. But there are always fan favorites. But it did move the world along in different areas for all the factions. It kept all the factions engaged, and that was, for us, very satisfying to see. There are fanatics among our community.
Well, yes. You get them everywhere. The interesting thing from how I view the living world is when people are coming in and they're looking to start into a faction, it gives you a view of the faction from inside the faction. So you're not having the external narrator. You're not picking up a book where it's being told like 100 Kingdoms are the good guys and the Spires are the bad guys. You can go in here and you go, okay, well, here are the Spires from within the Spires. And you get little hints of how the society works, and then you can obviously expand. There's plenty of lore beyond the living world as well that tells you more and more about it. But then I also like, you get obviously the fanatical players of those specific factions going, well, I want to see it go this way. But at the same time, you just know that the players from other factions are just going in and going, oh, wouldn't it be terrible if this happened? Oh, that would just be horrible. Click, 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 vote, 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 vote. So it's like
it is
a tug
actually
of war.
It is, and it is actually very interesting to watch. Like if you join our Discord community and follow the lore channel,
Hmm.
uh, every other Friday, every Living World Friday, I just log in. I don't often comment, but I just log in and watch the conversation with the new choices and the repercussions of the choices they made, because they're not always, white, black. And if
Yeah.
if you click this, this will happen. If you click this, other people will react to it, people that the players do not control through their voting.
Hmm.
So it creates a dynamic, and people are always commenting on like, oh, this happened. Oh no, we can't allow the Old Dominion to take one of our of our matriarchs, for instance, and stuff and it becomes kind of almost like a lobbying for each
Yeah.
decision at times, and it's very interesting to watch and very satisfying from our point of view that it's very nice to see the players so engaged with the characters and the story. So that's always nice. But you're absolutely right. Getting that first introduction through a character's point of view makes it easier, especially for new players to see and understand the faction that they like, or factions that they don't like. It's always interesting to see what the other guys are doing. And it has served us very well for years, this format. But I think that both the game itself and the narrative is entering a new phase. And as our community has grown and keeps growing, I think it's only to the benefit of the players that we give them more meaningful, now more meaningful choices and more meaningful storylines that kind of drift away from the classic, this is your faction, vote according to your faction, and make it more of a, this is the story of the world, vote in a way that guides the world towards a path that draws you more. We experimented quite a bit with different special events that we did, like the Rismar campaign, I think a couple of years ago it was, where people got very engaged. It was full-blown battle. It was almost all the factions were involved there, with the spires being a little on the background, but still affecting. And people got very into it, and it changed the map effectively. The Nords still occupy part of one of the Hundred Kingdoms territories, Rismark. They kind of control part of its shoreline, all the way deep, controlling some of the rivers, which are very important for Rismark economy. And you can see that there's still battles going on there. Like that symbol is from the last battle that happened.
Don't worry about the people. They'll finish that off any day now and be on their way. I'll be fine.
And then the latest was the Awakening event, where we wanted to dive into more a little to the Old Dominion, because they are a very weird faction in many ways. It's because of their circumstances, which are like the mass population is pretty much soulless, empty vessels for Haslia's power or will, but not really, because other people are kind of controlling them or guiding them, and this was something that we wanted to introduce to the Old Dominion anyway, and we decided we won't do it ourselves. We will make an event out of it and let the players decide which direction the Old Dominion will take. And in a ambushing turn of events, if I'm honest, it came to a perfect balance between the two anointed that were kind of vying for power over this ritual that would affect the entire Old Dominion, and how the Old Dominion members and the undeath works.
Yeah.
It came into a perfect balance between them, which we thought was challenging, but also very interesting. How do we create a narrative where both sides win or lose at the same time? I think we achieved this. People were, as far as I can tell, were like the result, and it literally changed one of our factions. The way the faction is going to go forward is now going to be completely different from what it could have been one way or the other if one guy had won or the other guy had won. It's somewhere in the middle, I guess, but it's very different. It also killed off one of the main characters that we had so far.
Oops.
in a manner that made sense. And even though that surprised some people, it also made sense. It wasn't something that we did for shock value. It made sense for this particular character to be so invested in the thing that he was doing that he was willing to sacrifice himself to achieve it, since the ritual didn't work as he intended. But the takeaway from that was exactly that players enjoyed the fact that they influenced the world in a very significant manner. We enjoyed, because this was the intent for the living world from the beginning. We wanted the players to be involved in major changes in the world, not just small changes of a character or two. And we decided that going forward, now that we have a mature audience obviously we have constantly new players, and we will address that. I will come back to that later. But for our more mature audience, I think it made sense that we drive things forward and give them something new. So that's what we're going to do, starting probably in December, because in September, I'm sorry, because we are coordinating with other things of the Living World platform, which is larger than just the interactive map. We're going to start concentrating on storylines rather than characters. Of course, the storylines will have main characters, protagonists, and they will probably be and usually be from different factions in the same storyline that we will kind of explore like chapters of a book, more than this is the decision.
Yeah.
And we can't wait to bring that to you, because honestly, we think that it will affect the world in different ways. So our recipe for now is, because we want our world to be dynamic and not kind of every faction being isolationist and talking only to the other members of their faction. We want to see interactions between different factions and how that will affect and shape, because whenever you come in touch with something different, you are changing yourself a little. And that is our goal here.
Yeah. I suppose in many respects, it's like the difference between picking up an autobiography of a historical figure or reading the history of the period they're in, where you get a much broader concept of how they fit into what's happening around them and how they shape things, rather than just having the minutiae of one character sort of developed over time. It gives people a greater sense of agency about the world, not just about a single person they're influencing. And
that is true.
Doesn't tie you to that character so much either.
So then we can kill them off.
You can kill them off or promote them onto glory, depending on your point of view.
I think that's very true. I agree that the character is very good to kind of associate yourself with a specific protagonist and see a story through a specific point of view. But when you get like a grander narrative and a grander storyline, you have the option to kind of disassociate the events from the people. Of course, the people will be involved, and of course, the way the narrative will be presented will showcase points of view from different characters. But the goal now is for the story to take the center stage rather than the character. And hopefully our hope and our goal here is to exactly involve players with events that don't necessarily have to do with their faction, but instead influence the world at large. So if you are a Dweghom player, you don't need to vote only on the storyline that the Dweghom are more prominent. I mean, we expect fully that they will, but but when they know that, yes, but in the 100 Kingdoms, this massive thing is happening and the whole world is about to change. So, of course, that creates a feeling, as you said, a feeling of agency. Like, I can be involved in that and I can influence that, and that's great. And we also work on the background and this is why our spotlights right now are concentrated on the characters of the living world and their storylines. We're going to create an archive for those characters so that people can revisit or visit for the first time and find out who these guys were, what were their choices, how did that affect the world and the characters themselves. And the idea is that we will create a continuous storyline whether we call them chapters or book or everything, all these different phases of the living world as we go forward will exist on the map, and people will be able to explore them. And also we're looking for a way to bring them out of the map, because it, especially when you're not involved with clicking and voting, it becomes easier to read it in a more presentable format than clicking on the map, etc. So we have a lot of work to do. That's why we're taking a longer break this time, because we want to present things in a cohesive manner. And we're also coordinated with the, as I call, the backend living world, which is the AGM system that we use for organized play, for voting, for hosting events, and things like that. I will leave that for Leo to talk about at some point on another platform when he's ready and willing to talk about those things.
Just send him my way whenever you finally corralled him into a corner.
Of course. And he actually recently commented, "Oh my God, Gerry, I've missed Gerry." When I was in Athens, you have a video with Gerry Popo. I haven't done a video with him for so long.
Terrible.
I know.
He's left me alone.
I know.
Neglected and rejected in the corner as I am.
He is like that.
but I suppose also it shows not just that the living world, but the game world is expanding so much now as well. With the city-states being added, the Sorcerer Kings are coming, Weaver Courts, so many new factions, nations being added. If you were going to continue in that way, where you had 2 characters from each nation or faction, and then occasionally you'd be telling one of their stories, and then it could be a long time before you get round to them again, it sort of distances people from what's happening. Now the world has matured so much, the world has grown. It's a great time to explore the world story rather than individuals piecemeal. You can do a lot more with a lot more players and a lot more of the community as well, through exploring these large, I say large, not everything has to be a massive earth-shattering event to be part of the story of the living world. It could be something that may be relatively nondescript, but the repercussions may be felt in a larger way down the line as well. Was that part of the idea of taking this new direction? It
is because exactly, I think it connects to what I said earlier, that with so many different corners of the world explored through characters, by default, the way the narrative is, because the medium is important to the feel that you get about the storyline itself, by default, the narrative became kind of isolationist for each faction. Every faction was moving according to its own parameters, which is true. Like, we don't want to take away from that. Each faction has its own goals, its own philosophy, its own problems, its own solutions, its own aspirations. But at the same time, the living world is not just about move your faction, because then it becomes kind of a unofficial Risk board game, you know what I mean? And we knew that eventually it would come down to this if we continue down this path, that people would, the more passionate they were about their faction, the more they would promote it, regardless of what it meant, even if it was someone bent on destruction that is not really the faction main theme, but this guy is from that faction and he's cuckoo and he wants to destroy the world for whatever reason. Possibly a Dwagum guy, I would presume. It would create kind of a bias on the votes based on that. Now we go away from that, and exactly we're allowed to follow storylines that shows the interaction between the factions, that showcases that in one single storyline the Weavers are involved, even though they are not released yet. They are involved because they are a power of the world. The fact that we haven't released an army doesn't make them disappear from the world that they live in.
They're not less defined just because they don't have a presence on the physical tabletop yet. Yeah,
exactly. So that allows us, this format allows us to kind of showcase that these things, there are pieces that are moving, even if we don't have, miniature pieces. There are constant interactions between the factions because their borders are not really, this is the border, no one crosses, no one. There's trade going on. There's politics. There's, I support you here, because there's also inner fighting between every faction. Like, we've made sure of that. I support you here already. For instance, we have an example that even though the whole explosion of events that started our narrative was the Battle of Nepenthe, right now it has been strongly implied that Frederick and the alchemist from Nepenthe have come to a sort of understanding. I don't touch you, you don't touch me, we go our separate ways and pursue our separate goals so that we don't have to go through this again. Because it was a risky and costly business for both of us. This is not very easy to showcase through individual characters, because inevitably you came also with the Frederick. Vote for Frederick, vote for the alchemist. What if their choices are so opposed that they don't make sense?
Yeah.
This allows us to have a holistic approach to the world that showcases exactly the different factions. Not to mention that, if I'm honest, too many characters started coming into play. It became a whole thing. I'm being honest, people. Yeah. If you want other stuff to be made and be written, I need more time away from the living world.
It's the way to do it.
No, but seriously, the main concern is exactly to give more agency to the players and to showcase that the world is not one-dimensional depending on the character. There's multiple factors and multiple factions coming into play in every single storyline.
You were also saying that this will help new people fresh to the living world, and I think you're right. I think that map, while it's great, and it was nice seeing new characters appear and all of a sudden go, oh, there's the Woodrune have popped in. Whereas now, if you look at it, you're going, well, there's a dozen characters spread across that map, and each one of them has got X number of mini chapters within their story, and it is almost overwhelming to come in and try and anchor yourself into some part of the world,
that is true,
or even to find out how we got here. So I imagine there are a lot of people who would look at that and go, well, where do you even start? And being able to go in and pull out what has happened and codify it and go, here is your history, and here will be where you go to read that history. And then you don't have to worry about trying to keep tabs. Well, I'm on chapter 3 of this particular story or this particular part of the living world now. How does that interact with these other pins in the map? Where were they when this was happening? So there's a lot of codification, a lot of pulling together of all these separate strands to weave them into the narrative and let people see it sort of whole cloth.
That is true. I think another way to approach it or to think about it would be that this whole, let's say, chapter or book of the living world with the characters, the character point of view that we've had since we launched the living world, in a way, it's a prelude. It sets up for things that are going to be more impactful and more meaningful, maybe. I think that's possibly a good way to say it. It's like the prelude. Here is how the chess pieces were thinking before the chess match started.
Yeah.
I think that would be a very accurate approach, possibly. Like, let's see, I know the storyline now. I know the theater of war, the theater of politics, the theater of trade, the theater of everything. I see where it's going, but if I want to go back and look why is this like this? Why is this chess piece moving like that? I can go back and look into their storyline. I can have the synopsis that we're creating now, and that's why we're publishing it now, and we will be through all the way until we release the new format, and possibly, if time doesn't fit for all of them, keep doing it after we release the new format. And as you said, codify it in a way and kind of make it more presentable, because also we want this to be an enduring thing. Because, for instance, knowing what we're going to talk about in the next batch of storylines, some of the characters won't be involved as much, or their involvement won't be in any case or in any way apparent. We recently talked about Faded Magenta. He's a very good example that his impact is not really seen from the outside world. However, it does affect things, even if those things are decimals in the directorate's reports about how effective a spire is.
Yeah.
That forces them into policies, and those policies have repercussions in other ways. So we might not see everything. However, there is a cohesive story that ties everything together. We're now going to explore several different things to showcase that our next goal is exactly to showcase factions interacting with each other. This is very important to us. We don't want factions to feel isolationist. That is, and how they change because of that. Like similar changes to what you saw with the Old Dominion, I think you can expect with other factions as well. Won't say who.
Well, that does sound fascinating, especially when, I mean, mentioned it briefly at the start, Theradine, his sort of story being wrapped up, where he is going for broad sweeping changes with his hold in a remarkable way, and you can see how that may have massive ramifications down the line for, well, not just the Dweghom and his hold, but potentially anybody he comes into contact with. I mean, progress.
If we're honest, the 100 Kingdoms are in for a surprise. There's going to be a mountain crossing. So, yes, that is a good example that Theradine and his hold is exactly as most holds until they open and go into a berserking kind of phase. Theradine and his hold, even they are very isolation. Like they have the dragon trapped there since who knows when.
Yeah.
And now they're moving the entire prison / their hold through other factions' territories. Now, they don't care where they go by. It's as long as it's feasible in the sense that can we move the mountain through that territory? Like physically, mechanically, can we do it? If they can, they will go. So I don't think we will see Therodin's choices from now on.
Yeah.
But we will see a mountain moving on the horizon, and that affects everything. If the Spire see that a feat of this magnitude has been achieved, they will be scared out of their minds. They know what the Dweghom can do. They have already destroyed a bunch of spires, and not so long ago. It's only a few centuries ago. So his story is a background story in a way, until it won't be, because eventually he will reach his destination and things will get interesting.
Until the background becomes the foreground, and all of a sudden that lovely plain you grew up on is now the foothills of a Dweghom hold that arrived overnight. It's a thing to, well, I mean, it's very much the awestruck, I think is going to be the word for a lot of people. A certain amount of shock and awe coming.
But that is exactly, that is a good example. Therodine is a good example. That his storyline is very personal in a way, even though there is a grand thing going on. The audience might notice that Therodine is the only one written in present tense. Out of all the storylines, his is the one written in present tense, and there's a reason for that. He is... I was trying to convey the magnitude of character that he has. When it comes to the Dweghom, he is possibly the one with the most agm out there in terms of numbers. What he has achieved is tremendous for this age, which is to break the spirit of one of the enemies, of one of the dragons. Of course, he has the singular circumstance that he has a dragon in his backyard, but still living and breathing. But so that in itself is tremendous. He's a tremendous personality among the Dweghom, and the magnitude and kind of the gravity of that personality I wanted to convey with present tense. Is what does the Raegh do? This is what he does now. Because this is what matters. He doesn't really think about the future, or we don't see him think about the future. We don't see him, definitely not about the past, even though the past is very important to the Dweghom, he keeps it there. But every decision he makes moves the hold, and then in the end, it literally moves the hold and the whole world with it. And there's also in his storyline, there's the ending, which it was very interesting because if one goes back and reads all his individual pieces, they will notice that there's constant references of him looking at the eye of the dragon there.
Yeah.
Whenever he's about to make a big important decision, and he is between a very radical way of thinking and the traditional Dwegum way, he always looks at the dragon, not to get just for perspective, because he has obviously understood something that the others haven't, and we still haven't talked about what that is. And in the end, we realize that what he did to the dragon was not what the Dwegum have glorified him for, which is to break his spirit.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a fascinating character, because when you've got somebody who's been in control, been in power for so long, you would expect them to be conservative, reactionary, fear of change, that sort of thing. But you see throughout his story in the living world and in the recap, he can be quite progressive in some ways, and he doesn't always take the path that people expect. Sometimes he sees beyond it, and in that regard, you get these grand sweeping decisions being made, where often you would think, well, that in a lot of stories, to progress it, to move it in that direction, you would generally have to have upheaval. He would no longer be on the throne. Somebody else would have usurped his authority and power, but he's always one step ahead and searching for a route that he clearly has a defined direction to go in. And I do like the constant references to the dragon, and also the ending of that as well. It really shows that there's a lot more going on. He's like the warrior king who people don't realize he's a poet, and he's only a warrior by
that is a very nice
description
of him.
He has a great deal of thought going on. It's like the Marcus Aurelius sort of moment. Will people remember me as a warrior or as
a philosopher?
And he has that feeling of a character within that.
I think that description is perfect for Theradine. Like, there's 2 or even 3 Theradines. In fact, there's the one that the Dwegum see, which is like the Raegh, the old mountain. He's the guy. He is the personification of Agm with what he's done among modern Dwegum. Then there's the actual Theradine, the way he sees himself, which is there's constant doubt that is doubt of himself, not of what is supposed to happen in a way. There's doubt of, but should I do this? I know things could be, should be, must be different, because that's something that gives him the edge. He feels like there needs to be change, which is, for instance, why when his exemplar, he orders his exemplar to train for one day becoming a Raegh, what he tells him is, I want you to imagine the most menial task you can think of and do it for 2 days.
Yes.
Or 2 weeks, and during that time, what I need you to do is remain patient and somehow turn this menial thing into part of your plan as a leader. Which is, so I would love to tell you that this is all by design for him. And indeed, we make it appear so because that is how the Dwegum perceive him. Everything the Raegh does, there's purpose. But there are moments of doubt when he thinks to himself, or bouts of anger that display that he kind of does it just to do it. He's being provocative to be provocative. A big part of who Therodine is, I think, it's tiredness and loneliness and boredom. So he shakes things up, having, I think, dispelled from him the ideas of right, of wrong, of tradition, of he can do whatever he wants in a way up to certain limits because he's the personification of Agm.
Sure.
And that is very challenging for him because he has no challenges. So he creates constantly small challenges. The casts offer him, this should be your exemplar, or this should be your... No, I completely ignore both of you and take this guy. Sure, he's promising, but let's see what happens.
Yeah.
He had thought. He doesn't do things without thought, but he's also a little kind of trapped within himself and his solitude and his tiredness.
Hmm.
The first scene we see him, he looks very tired, and that is his theme. He is the old tired Dwegum that has achieved everything that he could within Dwegum society, so now he tries to achieve something beyond Dwegum society.
Hmm. And I suppose this encapsulates the first phase of the living world very well. The characters, their development, their lives within the world, coming to not an end, but to an end of that chapter, that book. The living world has brought them this far and developed them in ways that possibly you didn't even expect when the first time they were penned onto the map. But now we have these rich, developed characters, and now it's time to take the world forward and move it.
Absolutely
in a way like moving mountains.
Yes, true. You're a poet yourself.
There we go.
I think the same, for instance, just the same could be said for instance, for Frederick, which he has been a fan favorite because he was our first really character in our narratives through the Nepenthe short stories. Everybody, if you saw the early on Discord, was like, he will be the next emperor. And sure, that is in a way the way he sees himself. I will be the next emperor.
Sure.
The way things have gone so far showcase that maybe, I don't know, maybe the audience takes him down that path. That would be very interesting, in many ways very satisfying. But it's already been shown that, yes, but this world doesn't work like he is so good and so perfect and he will... No. Things have gone very bad for him exactly because he drew so much attention and exactly because people don't fight the new emperor or the prospect of a new emperor by going and attacking him. They left him alone to deal with the Nords.
Yeah.
They left him alone to deal with the Wadroon. They left him alone to deal with the Spires. He was very quickly isolated, and he has endured remarkably well considering all the odds were stacked against him, if I'm honest. There was a small phase where he could have died, but the audience did not allow that to happen. But again, we showcase that, yes, he started as this, the golden boy of the new nobility. He could be the modern emperor that we need until people, both the audience, I think, himself more importantly in the narrative, but also those around him, realize that, yes, but it's not that easy. There was only one Charles Armatellum, and there's a reason for that. He was a remarkably exceptional individual, and what he did is of momentous proportions. Yeah. It can be replicated that easily.
I mean, even if in the future he does become the emperor, who's to say that it brings about everything that the 100 Kingdom players and fans want to? I mean, he may end up just being, the figurehead with no real power, and meanwhile having to bend to all of these different factions below him, and it's just a head to hang a crown on a throne, and
because it's historically convenient or necessary. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. That honestly will be one of the future storylines. What will happen with the 100 Kingdoms? I think everybody expects it.
Yeah.
It won't be a cut and dry, this is now where we decide the emperor, I think. I think we will see multiple storylines kind of leading there to the necessity of, do we need an emperor or do we not? It might be that this is how we are the strongest. But that's exactly something that we cannot really approach through one character.
Yeah.
Alone. And we need storyline, and in fact, for something this big, possibly storylines that lead to that at some point.
Well, there we have it. It's been a fascinating talk about the living world and the direction it's going to be taking. So obviously the recaps will be coming up over the next few weeks, and then into the the new phase of the living world. It'll be fascinating to see how it goes as well. Hopefully this has brought people up to speed. If you have any questions about the living world, please drop them below, and we'll pass them across to the guys at Para Bellum. But otherwise, if you're not already signed up to the Para Bellum website, you really should go have a look, browse through the living world as it stands, and take a look around and see some of the interesting characters and stories that have already been told, and think about how you can tell the next ones. Bye-bye.
Go ahead and check out our other content on screen now. And while you're at it, why not hit subscribe and remember to ding our dong. Go on, you know you want to click it. Go on.